What if everything you were taught about struggle was wrong? What if the suffering, the grinding, the relentless pushing against life, all of it was simply the result of playing a game you never knew existed, by rules nobody ever handed you? Stop for just a moment. Breathe. Because what you are about to hear has the potential to shift something deep inside you, something that has been waiting, quietly, to be activated. This is not a promise of overnight miracles. This is something far more powerful than that. This is the architecture of how life actually operates, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Welcome to Elite Success Audiobooks, and welcome to the game of life and how to play it. Chapter 1. The Game. Most human beings move through their days as though life is a battlefield. They wake up braced for impact. They carry invisible armor into their relationships, their work, their inner world. They fight against circumstances, against other people, against their own minds. And they are exhausted. Deeply, chronically, spiritually exhausted. But here is what almost nobody ever tells you, and what Florence Scovel Shinn understood nearly a century ago, long before modern psychology or neuroscience would begin to catch up. Life is not a battle at all. It has never been a battle. It is a game, a sophisticated, intricate, profoundly rewarding game. And like every game ever designed, it operates according to specific laws, specific principles, specific rules that, once understood, change everything about how you show up and what you receive in return. The difficulty is not that these rules are hidden from us. The difficulty is that most of us were never taught them. We were handed a version of life that told us to work harder, push further, fight longer, and perhaps, if we were lucky, we might get what we were after. But luck is not a law, and hoping is not a strategy. The game of life responds not to desperation, but to alignment. Not to force, but to understanding. And the moment you begin to understand how it truly works, you begin to notice something extraordinary. The players who seem to move through life with grace, abundance, and a kind of unshakable calm are not necessarily smarter than you. They are not more talented. They are not more deserving. They have simply, somehow, consciously or unconsciously, learned to operate in harmony with the invisible laws that govern every outcome. So let us begin at the very foundation of this understanding. Jesus Christ, one of the greatest teachers of spiritual law the world has ever encountered, taught with remarkable consistency that life is a game of giving and receiving. The principle he articulated, which echoes across every major spiritual tradition on earth, was this: whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap. Read those words slowly. Let them land, because this is not a metaphor. This is not poetic language designed to inspire good behavior. This is a description of a living, operating, unfailing law, as precise and reliable as the law of gravity. Whatever you send out in word, in thought, in deed, in emotional energy, it returns. Always, without exception, without judgment, without favoritism. If you extend hatred into the world, hatred finds its way back. If you radiate love, love returns, often multiplied, often from unexpected directions. If you speak criticism of others constantly, you will find yourself increasingly surrounded by criticism directed at you. If you build your interactions on deception, deception will eventually become the language of your own experience. This is not punishment. It is not karma in the punitive sense that many people misunderstand. It is simply the natural, mathematical return of what has been placed into motion. A boomerang does not come back because the universe is judging you. It comes back because that is what boomerangs do. But there is a second dimension to this game that is even more fascinating, and in many ways even more powerful than the law of sowing and reaping. It is the role of the imaging faculty, the imagination. That invisible, ceaseless, extraordinarily creative part of you that is generating pictures, scenarios, and stories every single moment of every single day, whether you are consciously directing it or not. The ancient wisdom of Proverbs puts it this way: keep your heart, or your imagination, with all diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. This single instruction, if truly absorbed, could revolutionize the trajectory of a human life. Because what it is saying is not merely philosophical. It is saying that what you consistently picture in your mind's eye with emotional intensity, with repetition, with belief, will in time manifest in your external reality. Consider for a moment what this means. It means that your imagination is not a passive daydreaming function. It is an active, creative force. It is, in a very real sense, the tool with which you are continuously building your life, whether you realize it or not. The imagination has been called the scissors of the mind. It is forever cutting. Day by day, it is selecting and shaping the images that the subconscious mind then receives and works to externalize. And here is the part that so many people miss, the part that makes this understanding both humbling and extraordinary. The subconscious mind does not distinguish between what is real and what is vividly imagined. It receives pictures and it works to make them manifest. It is not evaluating, it is not judging, it is executing. This is why a person who lives in constant fear of a particular disease may draw that disease into their body even when every external factor should protect them. This is why a person who habitually pictures themselves as unlucky will find, again and again, that circumstances seem to conspire against them. And this is equally why a person who has trained their imagination to hold clear, consistent pictures of health, abundance, love, and meaningful contribution will find those very things materializing in their life with a frequency and a regularity that others around them may attribute to luck, but which is, in truth, simply law operating as it always has. To play this game successfully, then, the very first task is this: train the imaging faculty. Reclaim conscious direction of the pictures you are holding in your mind. Because a person whose imagination has been trained to image only the good, only health, only abundance, only love, only the fulfillment of their deepest and most righteous desires, becomes, quite literally, a magnet for those very things. They do not have to chase them. They do not have to force them. They simply hold the vision, align their words and actions with that vision, and allow the law to do what the law always does. Now, in order to truly understand how to direct the imaging faculty, we must first understand the territory in which it operates. There are 3 distinct dimensions of the human mind, and each plays a crucial and irreplaceable role in the game of life. The Greeks, in their ancient wisdom, offered a deceptively simple instruction: know thyself. And what they were pointing toward was precisely this: that without an understanding of how your own mind operates, you cannot hope to direct it with any consistency. The first dimension is the subconscious mind. This is the vast, deep, extraordinarily powerful reservoir that lies beneath the surface of conscious awareness. The subconscious is pure power without inherent direction. Think of it like electricity, enormous, transformative, capable of illuminating entire cities or causing destruction, but entirely dependent on how it is directed, on what channel it is sent through. The subconscious has no capacity to judge, no ability to reason, no mechanism for deciding whether what it receives is true or false, beneficial or harmful. It simply receives and then executes. Whatever a person feels deeply, whatever they image clearly and consistently, becomes impressed upon the subconscious, and the subconscious then works with meticulous and faithful precision to bring that impression into physical form. This is why habit is so powerful. This is why childhood experiences carry such long shadows. This is why repeating an affirmation, a statement of truth spoken with conviction and feeling, can, over time, genuinely rewire the patterns that govern a person's experience. Because every time a thought, a word, an image, or an emotional experience enters the subconscious with sufficient intensity, it creates an impression. And impressions, repeated, become beliefs. And beliefs become the invisible architecture of a life. The second dimension is the conscious mind. This is the rational, reasoning, surface-level mind, the one that analyzes, compares, calculates, and judges. In many spiritual traditions, this mind has been called the mortal or carnal mind, because it sees life exactly as it appears to be, in all its limitation and apparent finality. The conscious mind sees illness and concludes that recovery is unlikely. It sees financial lack and concludes that abundance is impossible. It sees a relationship in conflict and concludes that reconciliation is unrealistic. The conscious mind, operating in isolation, is inherently limited, because it can only work with what the physical senses have delivered to it. And the physical senses are always operating on a time delay, reporting what was, not what is becoming. And yet, and this is the crucial insight, the conscious mind is also the gatekeeper. It is the faculty through which you can choose what to impress upon the subconscious. It is the doorway between the outer world and your inner creative power. When directed with wisdom and spiritual understanding, the conscious mind becomes one of the most important instruments in the game of life. The third dimension is the superconscious mind, and this is where things become genuinely extraordinary. The superconscious mind is the God mind, the divine intelligence operating within each person. It is the realm of perfect ideas. It is the dimension where your highest possibilities, your truest destiny, your most complete and radiant self-expression already exists as a finished, perfect, fully realized reality. Plato spoke of this realm as the place of perfect patterns, the divine design. And what this means, practically, is that for each human being alive on this earth, there is a perfect picture already held in superconscious mind. A destiny to fulfill, a contribution only they can make, a place only they can fill. No one else can fill it. No one else can bring it into the world. It belongs to the one it was designed for. Most people catch glimpses of this in moments of inspiration, a sudden flash of vision that seems almost too extraordinary to be real, a sense of possibility so expansive and so alive that the rational mind immediately dismisses it as fantasy. But these flashes are not fantasy. They are communiques from infinite intelligence. They are the superconscious mind transmitting the truth of what you are capable of and what you are here to manifest. The tragedy is that most people, conditioned by a lifetime of limitation thinking, dismiss these flashes rather than holding them, nurturing them, and acting on them with faith. And this brings us to one of the most important and most frequently ignored teachings in the entire game of life. Words have power. Not merely symbolic power, not merely psychological power. Real, creative, law-governed power. Jesus Christ taught with absolute clarity that the spoken word plays a leading role in the game of life. By your words, he said, you are justified, and by your words you are condemned. This is not theological language designed to inspire good behavior. It is a statement of law. The words you speak, aloud, in conversation, in the quiet monologue of your own inner world, are continuously impressing your subconscious and continuously setting forces in motion that will return to you in kind. Consider how carelessly most people use language. They say they are sick and tired of something and wonder why depletion follows them. They joke about poverty and gradually find their financial circumstances contracting. They speak words of doubt and defeat into their most cherished aspirations, and then attribute their lack of progress to bad luck or unfair circumstances. The subconscious mind has no mechanism for detecting humor. It does not understand sarcasm. It receives every word spoken with feeling as a directive, and it acts accordingly, faithfully, precisely, without mercy and without bias. But this same law that makes careless words so costly also makes intentional, faithful, precisely chosen words extraordinarily powerful. When a person learns to speak only what they intend to create, to hold their tongue against expressions of fear and lack, and instead to speak words that align with the reality they are calling forth, they begin to discover that the invisible machinery of life begins to move on their behalf. Circumstances shift. Doors open where walls seemed to stand. Resources arrive from unexpected directions. People appear who carry exactly the piece of the puzzle that was missing. This is the beginning of what could be called the scientific approach to living. It is the recognition that you are not a passive observer of your life. You are not a victim of circumstance or chance or the actions of others. You are at every moment actively co-creating your experience through the impressions you hold in your imagination, the beliefs lodged in your subconscious, the words you speak into the world, and the degree of faith or fear with which you meet each moment. The goal of the game, then, is not simply to accumulate material things, though material abundance is absolutely part of what this law makes available to those who understand and apply it. The goal of the game is to see clearly one's good, to hold a vision of the highest, most complete, most radiant possibility, and to dissolve all the mental pictures of limitation, fear, and inadequacy that stand between a person and that possibility. This is done not by fighting the negative pictures, because what you resist persists, but by replacing them, by impressing the subconscious with such a clear, consistent, emotionally charged picture of the good you desire that the old pictures of lack and fear simply fade for lack of attention. One of the most effective methods for doing this is what we might call the spoken declaration, a carefully constructed, precisely worded statement of truth, spoken aloud with conviction, with feeling, with the full authority of a person who understands that their words are not wishes, but instructions. When spoken in this way, not once, but repeatedly, not tentatively, but boldly, these declarations begin to penetrate the subconscious and displace the old, limiting recordings that have been running on repeat, often for decades. Speak these words now with power and with genuine intention. Feel them as you speak them. Let them land not just in your ears, but in the deepest part of you. I now release every untrue record from my subconscious mind. Every picture of lack, every story of limitation, every recording of fear and inadequacy, I dissolve them now by the authority of my spoken word. I now establish new records through the divine intelligence within me, records of radiant health, records of expanding abundance, records of deep, genuine love, records of perfect self-expression, the full, magnificent, unobstructed expression of everything I was created to be. This is the square of life. This is where the game begins, not out there in the circumstances and conditions of the external world, but in here, in the invisible terrain of your own consciousness. Because every condition you have ever experienced was first a condition within. And every transformation you will ever experience will begin there too. Not with a change of luck, not with a change of circumstance, with a change of mind. And a change of mind begins with understanding the rules of the game, which is exactly what you have chosen to do. By being here, by listening, by allowing these words to find their place within you, you have taken the first move. And the law of this extraordinary game says that the moment a person makes the first move, the moment they ask, seek, knock, the universe begins to move in response. The question that naturally arises at this point is, if these laws are so reliable, if the game operates with such mathematical precision, why do so many intelligent, well-intentioned people continue to experience lack, illness, conflict, and disappointment? The answer lies in a single word that carries within it one of the most transformative insights available to any human being. That word is alignment, or more precisely, the lack of it. Because it is entirely possible to consciously desire one thing while unconsciously picturing, expecting, and speaking the opposite. And when that happens, it is always the deeper, more emotionally charged impression that wins. A woman who deeply wants financial abundance, but who spends her days rehearsing conversations about how much things cost, how little she has, how uncertain the future feels, she is not aligned. She is standing in two places at once, and the subconscious mind, receiving this divided signal, cannot manifest consistent abundance any more than a seed can grow when it is planted one day and uprooted the next. The work of alignment is the work of bringing every dimension of one's inner world, thought, word, image, feeling, belief, into harmony with the reality one is calling forth. And it is precisely this work that the great teachers, the most effective healers and guides of human consciousness, have understood across every age. This is why the most successful people in any field are not necessarily those who work the hardest or who have the greatest natural gifts. They are often those who have developed, consciously or through fortunate conditioning, the deepest, most unwavering alignment between what they want and what they genuinely expect. They do not work against themselves. They do not contradict their own aspirations with a steady stream of doubtful, fearful, contradictory inner commentary. They hold the vision. They speak in harmony with it. They act from it. And the law, operating as it always does, brings it into form. There is one more essential truth that grounds the entire game: divine right. The concept that every person has a highest good, a most perfect outcome, a most complete fulfillment, and that pursuing any specific form through personal will alone, without alignment to the deeper design, may produce a result, but will rarely produce lasting satisfaction. The instruction, therefore, is to ask not just for a particular thing, but for the right thing. Not just for a job, but for the right position, the one already planned in divine mind. Not just for a relationship, but for the right relationship, the one that is truly yours. This shift in how one asks, from demanding a specific form to welcoming the perfect substance, is one of the most powerful adjustments a player of this game can ever make. Consider what this looks like in practice. A person comes to this understanding having spent years chasing a specific outcome, a particular sum of money, a particular person, a particular position, and always finding that even when they get close, something shifts, something slips, something falls just short. Not because the universe is withholding from them, not because they are undeserving, but because the specific form they have been chasing was never the deepest expression of what they truly needed. The moment they release the specific form, not with resignation, but with genuine trust, and replace that tightly held demand with an open, expectant invitation to receive the right thing, the perfect equivalent, the divinely chosen version of their heart's desire, something in the invisible world shifts. A pressure releases, a channel opens, and what arrives, often swiftly, often from a direction they never anticipated, carries not just the practical satisfaction of the desired outcome, but a depth of rightness, a quality of fit that could only have come from intelligence beyond the personal mind's planning. This is what the game looks like from the inside when you begin to understand its laws. It is not passive. It is not about sitting and waiting for the universe to deliver. It is an active, engaged, deeply intentional collaboration between the personal self, its desires, its imagination, its spoken words, its deliberate choices, and the superconscious intelligence that sees the complete picture, holds the perfect pattern, and knows exactly which paths lead to the highest expression of each individual life. The partnership between these two, the personal and the divine, is what great living actually is. And beginning to develop that partnership is what this game is actually asking of you. And beneath all of it, woven through every law, every principle, every spiritual instruction offered in these chapters, runs a single thread: the elimination of fear. Because fear is not merely a feeling, it is faith pointed in the wrong direction. It is the imaging faculty generating pictures of the dreaded outcome rather than the desired one. And those pictures, held with emotional intensity in the subconscious, carry exactly as much creative power as pictures of faith and abundance. Which is why the work is always inner work. Always. The territory is your own mind. The battlefield is your own consciousness. And the victory, the real, lasting, transformative victory, is won not by fighting life, but by learning at last to play it with full understanding, with knowledge, with unshakable faith, with an unwavering, daily, moment-to-moment commitment to holding the vision of your highest and most complete good. This is where we begin. And if you allow it, this beginning may well change everything. Drop 11. I am the architect of my own awakening in the comments right now. Chapter 2. The Law of Prosperity. One of the most liberating realizations available to any human being is this: God, infinite intelligence, the divine source from which all things emerge, is not merely a spiritual concept. It is supply, actual, inexhaustible, perfectly responsive supply. And the moment a person genuinely absorbs this understanding, not merely as a theological idea, but as a working law that governs the movement of resources through their life, everything about how they relate to money, to abundance, to the very concept of financial well-being begins to shift. The ancient scriptures carry this message with a directness that is often overlooked. The Almighty shall be your defense, and you shall have plenty. Not perhaps, not under certain conditions, not if you are good enough or disciplined enough or fortunate enough. You shall have plenty. Because there is a supply for every demand, there is an answer for every genuine need. There is a provision already present in the invisible realm for every righteous desire of the heart, awaiting only the alignment of consciousness, the clarity of word, and the activation of faith to draw it into visible form. This is not wishful thinking, it is the operation of law. A law as consistent and as impersonal as gravity, which does not favor the educated over the uneducated, the young over the old, the beautiful over the plain. Gravity simply operates. And the law of prosperity operates in precisely the same way. It responds to the state of consciousness. It responds to the spoken word charged with faith. It responds to the deliberate, genuine, unwavering expectation of abundance. And it brings into manifestation the precise equivalent of whatever has been established in consciousness as real. The challenge for most people is not that this law is inaccessible. The challenge is that their inner world, their habitual thoughts, their emotional undercurrent, their spoken words throughout the day, is broadcasting a signal of lack, of uncertainty, of barely enough. And the law, faithful as it always is, brings into their experience the precise equivalent of that signal. Not because the universe is withholding, not because abundance is reserved for a privileged few, but because the channel through which abundance must flow has been constricted by the very thoughts and words and expectations that were meant to invite it. Consider the difference between two people facing the same financial circumstance. One responds with anxiety, with frantic calculation, with a tight grip on what little remains, with words that continuously rehearse the reality of lack. The other responds with a kind of grounded, expectant calm, not denial of the practical situation, but a refusal to accept it as the final word. A refusal to allow the outer condition to become the inner conviction. This second person speaks words of supply, holds images of abundance, and maintains what could only be called active faith. The faith that moves, that prepares, that acts as though the supply is already on its way, because in the invisible realm, it already is. And the law, every time, without exception, reflects back to each person the sum total of their inner state. Outer conditions are always, always the mirror of inner consciousness. Write 888. Abundance is my divine birthright in the comments below. The principle of active faith, of acting as though the desired demonstration has already been received, is one of the most practically important and most frequently misunderstood aspects of this entire law. It is not pretense. It is not self-deception. It is the recognition that in divine mind, the supply already exists, complete, perfect, fully realized, and that the work of the individual is to come into alignment with that existing supply rather than to strain and push to create it from nothing. The supply is already there. The question is only whether the individual's consciousness is open and prepared to receive it. This is why the story of the three kings in the desert carries such enduring relevance. Facing a desperate shortage, no water for their men or their horses, standing in dry and barren terrain with no sign of relief anywhere in sight, they received from the prophet Elisha what must have seemed like a profoundly counterintuitive instruction. Make this valley full of ditches. Not wait for rain, not search for a water source, not conserve what little you have. Dig. Prepare the channels through which the supply will come, before there is any visible sign that it is coming. And the valley, in due time, was filled to overflowing. This is the principle of the ditch. Preparation in the absence of visible evidence. Action that declares through its very existence that the supply is already real and already on its way. A woman looking for an apartment during a time of extreme housing shortage does not spend her energy lamenting the impossibility of her situation or rehearsing conversations with unsympathetic friends about how hopeless things look. She buys the blankets. She prepares the space. She acts from the conviction that her perfect apartment already exists in divine mind, and that it will manifest through the channels that divine intelligence has already arranged, channels that her active, fearless preparation helps to open. This is active faith in its most practical form, and it is available to every person in every circumstance at every stage of life, regardless of what the outer evidence appears to suggest. Now let us examine the specific mechanics of how prosperity is released through the spoken word, because this is where the law of abundance and the power of language become inseparable, and where the daily practice of a person who genuinely understands these principles looks quite different from the daily practice of someone still operating in the old paradigm of effort and struggle. The person who understands that God is their supply does not beg. They do not plead. They do not approach infinite intelligence with the posture of someone who suspects they might be refused. They approach with the quiet authority of someone who knows the law, who knows their rightful inheritance, and who is simply activating the channel through which what is already theirs can flow. Their prayers are not petitions, they are commands. Their words are not wishes, they are declarations. And their gratitude is not reactive, it is anticipatory. It precedes the manifestation because they understand that the manifestation in the invisible realm is always prior to the manifestation in the visible. Give thanks before the evidence arrives. Rejoice in the desert before the rain comes. This is not irrationality. This is the highest, most sophisticated form of engagement with the law of prosperity, because it is the form that keeps the channel fully open, undisturbed by doubt,
uncollapsed by impatience. The person who gives thanks before the demonstration arrives is the person whose consciousness remains steady, expectant, and receptive, which is precisely the state in which the law can bring the demonstration through. And what of those who ask for success while simultaneously preparing for failure? Who speak the word of abundance while spending their inner hours rehearsing the conversations they will have when things go wrong? This internal contradiction, this divided signal sent to the subconscious, neutralizes the spoken word as surely as a wire short-circuits an electrical current. The law cannot bring forth a clear manifestation from a divided consciousness. It needs a channel, and a channel divided against itself cannot carry the full power of divine supply. This is why one of the most critical practices in demonstrating prosperity is what might be called mental housekeeping. Watching the inner conversation, monitoring the images being held in imagination, catching the drift toward worry and redirecting, not with force, not with suppression, but with a gentle, firm return to the vision of the good that is already prepared. Again and again, as many times as the drift occurs, until gradually, through consistent redirection, the dominant vibration of the inner world becomes one of expectancy, of abundance, of gratitude. And the outer world, faithful mirror that it always is, begins to reflect that inner shift in the form of changed circumstances, opened doors, and supply arriving from the most unexpected and delightful directions. There is a phrase worth holding. Infinite Spirit, open the way for great abundance. This woman is an irresistible magnet for all that belongs to her by divine right. Simple words, but spoken with faith, spoken with feeling, spoken with the genuine
conviction that they are activating a real and responsive law, they carry extraordinary power. They go forth into the invisible realm, not as sounds in the air, but as instructions delivered to the one intelligence that governs all supply. And that intelligence, which sees every channel and every possibility simultaneously, begins at once to arrange the circumstances, the people, and the conditions through which the supply can flow. A woman arrives with $8 to her name. She is worn through, discouraged, carrying the weight of circumstances that seem to offer no way forward. And yet, the moment she connects to this understanding, the moment she allows herself to be pointed not toward her lack, but toward her divine supply, the moment she follows the quiet inner prompt that her reasoning mind would have dismissed as impractical, a chain of events begins. One connection leads to another. A seemingly coincidental encounter opens a door, and thousands of dollars arrive through a path that no amount of anxious planning could have arranged. Not luck, law. Operating precisely, faithfully, exactly as it always does when the conditions for its operation are met. There is always plenty on the pathway of every person. But it can only find its way into physical experience through three specific channels: desire, faith, and the spoken word. Desire is the starting point, the clear, genuine, heartfelt want that activates the law. Faith is the carrier, the unwavering inner knowing that what has been desired and spoken is already in the process of manifestation. And the spoken word is the instrument,
the declaration that sets everything into motion, that gives form to the desire, that authorizes the invisible intelligence to act. Man must make the first move. Ask, and it shall be given. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened. These are not encouragements. They are instructions in the mechanics of how the law operates. The divine supply is infinitely ready. The infinite intelligence is infinitely responsive. But man must ask. Man must seek. Man must knock. The initiative belongs to the individual. And the moment that initiative is taken, the moment the word is spoken in genuine faith, the universe begins to arrange itself in response. Chapter 3. The Power of the Word. By your words you are justified, and by your words you are condemned. This statement, taken at its full depth and weight, may be one of the most consequential truths any human being can ever genuinely absorb. Because what it is describing is not merely a moral principle. It is a law of consciousness, as exact and as unfailing as any law in the physical world. Every word spoken in feeling impresses the subconscious. Every impression in the subconscious moves toward manifestation. And the manifestations of a life taken together are simply the accumulated harvest of all the words spoken, aloud and internally, over time. A person who deeply knows this cannot afford to speak carelessly. Every sentence becomes a creative act. Every casual remark becomes an instruction delivered to the most faithful and powerful servant available, the subconscious mind, which receives without question and acts without hesitation. A man who consistently says, "I always miss the train," will miss trains with a regularity that seems uncanny to everyone around him. A woman who says, "I always catch things at just the right moment," will find, with equal regularity, that timing seems to conspire in her favor. Each has created a law for themselves through their spoken words, and each lives inside the reality that law has built. This understanding illuminates something that might otherwise seem like superstition. The psychology of lucky charms, of horseshoes and rabbit's feet and tokens carried for good fortune. The object itself has no power, but the belief connected to the object, the feeling of expectancy it activates in the person who carries it, does. Because expectancy is a state of consciousness, and the subconscious, receiving that state of consciousness clearly and consistently, moves to arrange circumstances that reflect it. Expectancy attracts. This is not magic. It is the law operating through the mechanism of belief. The danger arises when a person places their faith in the object rather than in the one power behind all things, the infinite intelligence that is the actual source of every good outcome.
Horseshoe, held by someone who understands that it is merely a symbol of their own faith, a reminder that good is available and expected, is harmless, and can even be helpful. A lucky charm trusted as the actual source of good fortune subtly misdirects the consciousness and eventually undermines the very faith it was meant to support. For the person who has grown in spiritual understanding, there are no lucky objects. There is only the one power operating through consciousness, through faith, through the spoken word. The spoken word also governs the body. This is one of the most astonishing and practically significant dimensions of this law, and one that most people have never seriously considered. Every critical, resentful, fearful thought that finds expression in words creates a corresponding physical effect in the body. Not eventually, not vaguely, not symbolically, but directly, through the precise mechanism of consciousness impressing the subconscious, which then communicates with every cell and system of the physical form. Continual criticism produces physical constriction in the joints. Sustained resentment creates hardening in arteries, in organs, in the subtle channels through which life energy flows. Fear, held in consciousness over time, depletes the immune capacity and opens the body to the very conditions that are feared. Every disease, every single one, has its origin in a mind not at ease. This is not a claim that physical causes are irrelevant. It is the deeper understanding that behind every physical cause there is a state of consciousness that either allowed or invited it. And this means, profoundly and practically, that healing is always, at its deepest level, a transformation of consciousness, a shift in what is being believed, felt, spoken, and imagined. The body, that extraordinarily responsive and faithful instrument, will reflect the inner shift just as reliably as it reflected the inner condition that preceded the illness. Comment 777. My words are seeds, and I plant only what I choose to harvest right now. Unforgiveness is one of the most prolific creators of physical illness. Not because the universe is punishing the unforgiving person, but because resentment, the emotional refusal to release the past, to let the wound be complete, is one of the most sustained and corrosive states of inner experience available to a human being. It requires continuous recreation to maintain. The subconscious, receiving this continuous signal of injury and injustice, translates it into physical form through the mechanisms of the body. And the person who carries long, deeply held resentment will, sooner or later, find it written somewhere in their physical experience. The remedy is love, not as a sentiment, not as an emotion that one waits to feel before offering it, but as a deliberate practice, a chosen state of inner orientation that is maintained regardless of what the outer behavior of others might seem to warrant. Send love to the person who wronged you, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve the freedom that comes from releasing the poison of resentment. Bless the one who has hurt you, not as a capitulation, but as an act of sovereign power, the power of a person who refuses to allow anyone else's behavior to determine the quality of their own inner experience. The story of the woman with the long-standing skin condition speaks directly to this. She had carried the condition for years, been told by physicians that it was incurable, watched it threaten the career she had built and loved. And then, in a single night, through hours of deep inner work, through a sustained encounter with the profound silence beneath the noise of her own reactivity, she arrived at genuine peace with herself, with the man who had wronged her, with the world that had treated her unfairly, She was not pretending. She was not suppressing. She was genuinely releasing. And the disease, which had found its foothold in the subconscious resentment that had been feeding it for years, dissolved. Not slowly, not partially, completely. This is the power of love operating as law. This is what becomes possible when a person understands that the invisible inner world is the actual terrain on which the battles of health and illness, abundance and lack, connection and isolation are ultimately won or lost. The outer world is always the echo. The inner world is always the voice. And the most powerful thing any person can do for any area of their life, their health, their finances, their relationships, their sense of purpose and direction, is to change what is happening on the inside. What man sends out in consciousness, he draws back to himself. What he blesses, he increases. What he condemns in others, he strengthens in himself and draws toward his own experience. What he holds in goodwill and love, regardless of the behavior that might seem to make such goodwill unwarranted, he protects himself from, because love is the greatest force of protection available in the universe. A person who sends genuine goodwill to everyone they encounter creates around themselves a field of consciousness through which harm cannot easily move. And this understanding, when genuinely absorbed and lived rather than merely intellectually appreciated, transforms not just individual experience, but every relationship, every environment, every interaction. Because the person who has truly claimed the power of the word, who has taken responsibility for what they are creating with every sentence, every inner monologue, every casual expression of opinion or judgment, is a fundamentally different kind of presence in the world. They are building with every word rather than demolishing. They are blessing rather than cursing. They are opening rather than closing. There is a practice, simple in its mechanics, extraordinary in its effects, that serves as a bridge between the understanding of these laws and their actual demonstration in daily life. It is the practice of blessing. Not in the religious sense that many people associate with the word, but in the very precise, very practical sense of directing genuine goodwill and positive creative energy toward people, circumstances, and conditions, including those that appear, on the surface, to be obstacles or limitations. When a person blesses their current financial situation, however limited it appears, rather than resenting or fearing it, they remove the emotional charge of resistance that was holding it in place. When they bless the person who seems to stand in the way of their good, they dissolve the tension creating that very opposition. When they bless money as it goes out, bills paid cheerfully, resources shared generously, they impress the subconscious with plenty rather than depletion. And the subconscious, faithful as always, reflects that impression in the outer experience. This is why the most prosperous people, those who have genuinely mastered the inner game of abundance, have a distinctive relationship with money. They do not grip it. They do not hoard it or treat it as something finite that must be rationed against the possibility of running out. They treat it as a flow, moving through their life as a river moves through a landscape, bringing life and then continuing on to bring the same to others. They give freely because generosity opens the channel wider. They spend wisely but fearlessly, understanding that fearfulness around money impresses the subconscious with scarcity, which the law then faithfully reflects back. They bless what they have, bless what they give, and bless what is coming. And what is coming always continues to come. The person who says there is not enough is speaking a word that the law will honor. The person who says, "My supply is divine and unfailing," is speaking a word the law honors with equal faithfulness. The only question that ever matters in the game of prosperity is which word you are actually speaking, in the depth of your consciousness, in the constant inner commentary beneath the surface of your days. That word is the one the law is responding to. And the moment you align the outer word with the inner word, the moment what you say and what you genuinely believe become one consistent signal, the law can operate at its full, extraordinary power. The old wisdom says that man should use his words for only 3 purposes: to heal, to bless, and to prosper. This is not a restriction. It is a description of what words are actually for, what they are capable of at their highest and most deliberate use. And a person who begins to live by this standard, who begins to treat every spoken word as a creative act, every sentence as a seed, every conversation as an opportunity to bless rather than burden, will find within a surprisingly short time that the texture of their daily experience begins to change. The people around them respond differently. Circumstances begin to carry a different quality. The sense of being supported, guided, and abundantly provided for, which had seemed elusive or conditional before, begins to feel like the natural, reliable, continuous state of their existence. Because it is. That is what the law of prosperity, operating through the power of the word, makes available. Not as an exception, not as a reward, as the natural consequence of alignment with the principles that govern the game of life. Chapter 4. The Law of Non-Resistance. Resist not evil. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Of all the laws contained within this extraordinary game of life, the law of non-resistance may be the one that most profoundly contradicts everything that the ordinary human mind has been conditioned to believe about how to succeed, how to protect oneself, and how to navigate a world that sometimes seems determined to work against you. Because the instinct to resist, to push back, to fight, to hold the line against what is unwanted, is so deeply embedded in the human experience that most people never question it. They simply assume that resistance is strength, and that yielding is weakness. But the ancient Chinese understood something that modern culture has almost entirely forgotten. Water is the most powerful element in nature, not because it is hard or forceful or unyielding, but precisely because it is perfectly non-resistant. Water does not fight the rock. It simply moves around it, beneath it, through every crack and crevice available to it. And in time, it wears the rock away entirely. What appeared to be immovable yields, inevitably, to what never insisted on forcing its way. This is the principle of non-resistance operating in the natural world. and it operates with equal precision and equal power in the world of human consciousness and human affairs. Jesus Christ taught this principle with remarkable directness. Resist not evil. And the deeper spiritual understanding behind this instruction is that evil, in the sense of any condition of limitation, lack, illness, or opposition, has no actual power of its own. It exists as a reflection of belief, as an outpicturing of the divided consciousness that sees two powers instead of one. When a person resists an unwanted condition, they are, in effect, granting it reality. They are placing the full force of their attention, their emotional energy, their inner creative power upon the very thing they do not want. And the law, operating as it always does, brings more of what is being focused upon. Resistance feeds what it fights, always. This is one of those truths that, once genuinely seen, cannot be unseen. It reframes every difficult situation. It transforms every apparent enemy into something else entirely. Because if resistance is the problem, if the act of pushing against something is actually the mechanism by which it gains strength and persistence in a person's experience, then the solution is not more resistance. It is release. It is the willingness to stop fighting, to stop arguing with what is, to stop placing the creative power of consciousness in the service of what is not wanted, and to redirect it entirely toward what is. Drop 444. I release all resistance and I flow into my highest good in the comments right now. This does not mean passivity in the face of genuine injustice. It does not mean becoming a doormat, accepting every condition without discernment, or abandoning the power of the spoken word and the vision of the good. Non-resistance is not the absence of intention. It is the absence of the fearful, contracted, combative inner stance that makes every problem larger and every solution more elusive. The non-resistant person is not weak. They are extraordinarily clear. They know what they want. They speak their word for it with authority. And then they release. They allow the divine intelligence to arrange the how and the when and the through what channels, without gripping, without micromanaging, without the anxious interference that the reasoning mind perpetually mistakes for helpfulness. Consider what happens when a person runs away from a situation they dread. They discover, with disconcerting regularity, that the situation follows them. The woman who leaves an unhappy home to escape a domineering, critical presence in her life finds, to her bewilderment, that she has married someone with exactly the same qualities. The pattern did not reside in the place she left or the person she left behind. It resided in her own consciousness, in the deep, emotionally charged picture of what she expected from intimate relationships. And the law, faithful as always, brought her experience into alignment with that inner picture. Running away from a condition never changes the condition. Only changing the inner reality changes the outer one. On the other hand, the person who turns to face what they have been avoiding, who walks toward the situation they have been resisting, who meets the feared encounter with openness and goodwill rather than braced defensiveness, frequently discovers something remarkable. The situation dissolves. The feared confrontation never materializes. The lion that seemed so terrifying at a distance, approached with fearlessness and peace, simply is not there. Agree with your adversary quickly, the ancient wisdom instructs. This means find the place of peace with the difficult situation. Be undisturbed by it at the level of your inner experience, and it will lose its grip and fall away of its own weight. None of these things move me is not denial. It is the statement of a person who has found their center and refuses to be pulled from it by the storms of outer circumstance. There is a story of a woman afraid of ladders, of the symbolic and literal bad luck she had associated with them for years. She had avoided them, walked around them, let them shape her path through countless small daily choices that kept her in a subtle but constant relationship with fear. And then, at a moment of reckoning, she chose to walk toward the ladder rather than away from it. She retraced her steps down into a vault where the ladder had stood in her path. And when she arrived, the ladder was gone. This is the law of non-resistance operating with its characteristic precision. The courage to face the feared thing, genuine courage, not performance, removes the thing itself, because the fear that attracted it has been replaced by something the law cannot fulfill in the same way. Because fear is always pulling toward it what it fears, and fearlessness, genuine inner peace, genuine equanimity, genuine trust in the one power, removes the very magnetism that was drawing the feared condition into experience. Living in the past is one of the most subtle and pervasive forms of resistance. It is the consciousness that refuses to release what was, that keeps returning to the injury, the loss, the failure, the humiliation, and in that returning keeps those experiences alive and generative in the subconscious. The robbers of time are the past and the future. The past, because clinging to it holds in consciousness what should be released, and the future, because projecting anxiety into it fills the inner world with pictures of what is not wanted rather than what is. Man must bless the past and let it go, genuinely, not merely in words. He must bless the future with expectation of the good that is already prepared in it. And he must live fully, fully present, fully awake, fully engaged in the now. Because the now is the only place where the law can actually operate. The only place where the word can be spoken with power. The only moment in which the vision can be held with clarity, the only point at which the divine supply can be received. The habit of beginning each day with intention, with a declaration that sets the inner compass before the outer world has had a chance to crowd in and pull the consciousness in a dozen different directions, is one of the most practically powerful things a person can develop. Speak the word upon waking. Give thanks for the day before it has unfolded. Declare completion, miracle, and wonder before a single circumstance has confirmed them. Because this is precisely the sequence through which the law operates. The inner declaration precedes the outer manifestation. The word goes before the event. The consciousness established in the morning shapes what the day then brings, because the day is always bringing forth what the consciousness within it is generating. The most powerful demonstration of this law in operation is the person who has learned to remain completely undisturbed by the appearance of things, who has trained their consciousness to hold the vision with such steadiness that what is currently visible simply cannot displace it. This person is described in the scriptures as one who stands still and sees the salvation of the Lord. Standing still is not inaction. It is the most active inner stance available, the deliberate, disciplined refusal to allow the outer picture to overwrite the inner vision. And it is from this place of standing still, of genuine inner steadiness, that the most dramatic outer demonstrations most reliably emerge. The story of the man who needed $50,000 for his business, with the bank having flatly refused and the time limit almost expired, illustrates this perfectly. The temptation in that moment is to accept the outer evidence as final, to collapse the vision in deference to the apparent facts, to give up and call it wisdom. But the person who holds the vision, who says effectively, "There is still time, the right outcome is still possible, divine intelligence is still operating," creates the conditions for what appears impossible to become effortlessly, almost absurdly simple. He walks into the bank with quiet confidence 15 minutes before closing, and they give him the money without question. Not because he was lucky, not because circumstances happened to shift, because the inner state he held, peaceful, clear, undefended, communicated to the external situation something that his previous tense and fearful approach had blocked. Anger dissolves power. Tension collapses channels. Anxiety closes the very doors that faith would have opened. And the person who can learn to approach their most pressing, most apparently urgent circumstances with genuine inner peace, not forced calm, not performed serenity, but the real, deep quietness of someone who genuinely trusts the law, will discover a quality of outer results that seems, to the untrained eye, miraculous. It is not miraculous. It is mechanical. It is the law operating without obstruction. One's ships come in over a calm sea. This phrase carries within it one of the most practically important insights in the entire game of life. The state of the inner sea, the quality of the consciousness, determines the conditions under which the demonstrations of life can arrive. A turbulent inner sea creates turbulent outer conditions. A calm inner sea creates the smooth, unobstructed pathway through which good can flow freely and completely. And the practice of inner peace, the daily, deliberate, committed cultivation of genuine equanimity, is not a luxury or a spiritual nicety. It is the most practical, most directly results-producing work available to any human being who has understood what this game is actually about. Living fully in the present moment is the ground from which all of this flows, not the past, which is already complete and can only be blessed and released, not the future, which exists as possibility and should be held in vision and expectation of good, rather than in anxiety and anticipation of difficulty. The now, this moment, this breath, this conversation, this specific, unrepeatable instant of experience in which the word can be spoken, the vision can be held, the gratitude can be genuinely felt, and the law can therefore operate with its full and extraordinary power. Man should be spiritually alert, ever awaiting the leads that come through intuition, through the gentle promptings of the inner voice that knows the shortest and most elegant path between where he is and where he is meant to be. Never miss a trick, spoken as an inner intention, is a declaration that keeps the consciousness alive to opportunity. Open to the unexpected nudge, the coincidence that is not a coincidence, the encounter that seems casual but carries within it exactly the piece of the puzzle that was missing. The intuitive lead does not explain itself. It simply points. And the person who has learned to follow the pointing, without demanding reasons, without insisting on the full logical case for the action suggested, will find themselves moving through life with a kind of effortless rightness that the purely reasoning mind can never manufacture. The person who has made a demand upon the universal and then takes their hands off, who speaks the word and then releases, who declares the demonstration complete in the invisible, and then goes about their day in peace and expectation, rather than anxious monitoring and frustrated waiting, is the person through whom the law can most readily operate. Infinite intelligence does not need to be managed. It does not need to be reminded or pressured or coaxed. It needs only to be invited through clear intention, spoken word, and genuine faith. And then given the non-resistant inner space through which it can bring the demonstration through in exactly the way that serves the highest good of all concerned. Chapter 5. The Law of Karma and the Law of Forgiveness. Man receives only what he gives. The game of life is a game of boomerangs. Every thought, every word, every deed sent outward returns. Not sometimes, not when certain conditions are met, not to certain categories of people and not others. Always, to everyone. With what the ancient Sanskrit called an accuracy that is astounding to anyone who has not yet seen how precisely and consistently the law operates. Whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap. This is karma. Not as punishment, not as cosmic judgment, but as the simple, mathematical, entirely impersonal return of what has been placed into motion. The speed of this return varies. A person who is growing rapidly in consciousness, who has genuinely internalized the spiritual laws and is actively applying them, will find that the return comes quickly. The gap between cause and effect narrows as awareness deepens. This is why people in high consciousness sometimes say that their karma returns almost instantaneously. A thought of irritation expressed in the morning returns as an experience of being irritated by noon. And this is not punishment. It is the law offering its clearest, most immediate feedback, making it easier to see the connection, to take responsibility, to correct course. The law of karma, the law of cause and effect, of sowing and reaping, is precise and unfailing. But within this game, there is also a higher law, a law that does not negate the law of karma, but transcends it, a law that offers what the law of karma alone cannot: freedom. This higher law is the law of grace, the law of forgiveness, the law that allows a person to neutralize their past mistakes rather than being endlessly required to reap their consequences. To go back and, through the spoken word and the genuine shift of consciousness it represents, call on the power that can wipe the slate clean, not through any external authority granting pardon, but through the operation of an inner law that is every bit as precise as the one it supersedes. Write 999. I release all karmic debt, and I step into grace right now in the comments below. This is what is meant by the instruction to call upon the law of forgiveness, to recognize that beneath the law of consequences, there is a law of grace that can dissolve those consequences when the consciousness shifts genuinely enough and completely enough. Not through ritual, not through pleading, through the actual inner transformation that makes the old pattern no longer the ruling reality of the subconscious. When a person genuinely forgives, themselves or another, they are not merely performing an act of kindness or moral generosity. They are actually changing the energetic reality of their own subconscious, dissolving the pattern that was generating the karmic return, and stepping into a new field of possibility where the old consequence can no longer reach them. This is why Christianity, at its deepest level, is built upon forgiveness, not as sentiment, but as law. The recognition that man is not ultimately bound by his past, by his mistakes, by the long chain of cause and effect that his ignorance or fear or selfishness has set in motion. There is a power within him, the Christ within, the divine intelligence within, the superconscious mind that can break the chain, that can redeem what has gone wrong, that can restore, even, the years the locusts have eaten. The practical application of this understanding is extraordinarily liberating. A woman realizes she has attracted a false bill to herself, a counterfeit passed to her, and in tracing back the cause, recognizes that she had earlier sent counterfeit value to someone else, intending it as a joke. The law does not understand jokes. It returned the equivalent of what was sent. But once she recognizes this, once she calls upon the law of forgiveness and speaks the word of grace, the outer situation resolves. The person at the bank, who would have been expected to be difficult and dismissive, instead apologizes and offers a replacement without friction. The law of grace operating through the law of forgiveness, a higher frequency dissolving a lower one. Order is a law. This is a practical and important teaching that many people overlook entirely. The consciousness that desires abundance while living surrounded by disorder, with drawers in disarray, spaces cluttered, commitments half-finished, projects left dangling, is generating in its immediate environment a picture of incompletion and chaos that continuously impresses the subconscious. And the subconscious, receiving this picture, mirrors it back in the financial affairs, the health, the relationships. Order is not merely aesthetically pleasing. It is a demonstration of the state of consciousness, and a consciousness that can create and maintain order in its immediate environment is demonstrating the very quality that allows the law to operate with precision and power in every other area of life. The man who desires wealth but who has not learned to care for what he already has, who treats his current possessions carelessly, who allows his immediate environment to deteriorate, who handles his existing finances sloppily, is sending a signal to the subconscious that is antithetical to what he consciously desires. The woman who straightens her home, organizes her bureau drawers, puts her physical world in order before making her prosperity declarations, is not wasting time on trivialities. She is establishing, in the most direct and concrete way available to her, a correspondence between her outer world and the inner world of order, care, and abundance she is calling forth. And the demonstration, when she has done this work, comes quickly and naturally, because the channel has been cleared. Gifts and generosity are not expenditures. They are investments of the highest order. The law of circulation, the understanding that money is meant to flow, that generosity opens channels rather than depleting them, that withholding and hoarding create the very constriction they are designed to protect against, is one of the most practically powerful principles available to anyone who will genuinely apply it. There is that scattereth, and yet increaseth. This is not a paradox. It is a precise description of how the law operates. The one who gives freely, who blesses what goes out, who releases resources with a spirit of genuine abundance and trust, creates the conditions in which more can continuously flow in. The one who withholds, who hoards, who places the security of accumulation above the freedom of circulation, gradually finds that the supply itself constricts, that the stream narrows, that the very security they were protecting is eroded by the energetic law they were unwittingly violating. This does not mean recklessness. It does not mean giving away what is needed for genuine obligations, or abandoning prudent stewardship of what has been entrusted to one's care. It means holding every resource in an open hand rather than a closed fist. It means giving cheerfully when giving feels right, spending wisely when spending serves the vision, and trusting, with genuine, active, demonstrated trust, that the supply is not finite and fixed, but infinite and flowing. That what goes out in the right spirit returns, always, multiplied and blessed. Man's supply is inexhaustible and unfailing when fully trusted. But faith, or trust, must precede the demonstration. According to your faith, be it unto you. This is not a spiritual platitude. It is the precise operating instruction for the law of prosperity. The level of trust, the depth of genuine expectancy, determines the level of what is received. The person who understands this, who takes it seriously enough to cultivate deeper trust as a daily inner practice, who monitors their expectancy and works to expand it as deliberately as they would expand any other skill or capacity, that person will find, again and again, that the law confirms exactly what they expected. In the most remarkable, most surprising, most abundantly generous ways imaginable. And here is the liberating truth that ties these two great laws together, the law of karma and the law of grace. You are never permanently bound by what has been set in motion. The law of forgiveness is not a loophole in the system of cause and effect. It is a higher system altogether, one in which the genuine transformation of consciousness can dissolve consequences before they fully materialize, can restore what seemed irretrievably lost, and can open pathways into the future that the unforgiving, unreleased, resistant mind could never have accessed. This is the good news that has always been at the heart of genuine spiritual teaching. Not that the law of consequences does not exist, but that there is a law greater than consequences, and it is available to every person who genuinely turns toward it and activates it through the sincerity of their inner transformation and the authority of their spoken word. Chapter 6. Casting the Burden. There is a moment in every sincere student of these laws when the intellectual understanding becomes too heavy to carry alone. When the knowing is clear, but the demonstration refuses to come. When the affirmations have been spoken and the vision has been held, and yet the subconscious, with its deep roots in years of contrary belief, seems to resist the very transformation that the conscious mind is so earnestly seeking. It is at precisely this moment, not before it, not after it, but in the thick of it, that one of the most practically powerful practices available in the entire game of life becomes relevant. It is called casting the burden. The instruction comes directly from the Psalms, "Cast thy burden upon the Lord." And what it means, understood in the full light of spiritual law, is this: place the weight of the problem, the difficult condition, the seemingly immovable circumstance, the deep and stubborn belief in lack or limitation or disease, not in the hands of the conscious mind, which is limited and filled with doubt, and not in the grip of the reasoning intellect, which can only work with what the physical senses have reported. Place it in the hands of the superconscious mind, the God mind within, the Christ within, the dimension of infinite intelligence that sees the complete picture, holds the perfect pattern, and is already in possession of the perfect solution, awaiting only the genuine surrender of the personal mind's insistence on managing everything itself. A metaphysician once illustrated this principle with an image from physics. A boulder high above the earth has no weight. Weight is the product of gravity, of the relationship between mass and proximity to the planetary surface. Lift the boulder far enough above that surface, and its weight becomes nothing. Cast the burden high enough into the realm of spiritual understanding, and it too becomes nothing, because in the realm of the superconscious, where only perfect ideas exist, there is no lack to be burdened by, no disease to be frightened of, no limitation to be overcome. There is only the perfect pattern, already complete, awaiting its outpicturing in the physical world. This is what Jesus Christ meant when he said, "Come to me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light." He was speaking from the consciousness of one who had fully identified with the superconscious, who functioned permanently in the fourth-dimensional realm of perfection and completion. And he was extending an invitation to every person burdened by the weight of mortal, limited thinking to make the same identification, to cast the weight of the problem into that realm where it cannot exist as a problem, where it can only exist as the perfect solution already present and already moving toward manifestation. The method is simple, deceptively simple. It is a statement spoken repeatedly and with genuine intention until the feeling beneath it shifts. I cast this burden upon the Christ within, and I go free. What follows those words, the specific burden being cast, varies with the circumstance. I cast this burden of lack upon the Christ within, and I go free to have plenty. I cast this burden of resentment upon the Christ within, and I go free to be loving, harmonious, and at peace. I cast this burden of fear upon the Christ within, and I go free to move forward with confidence and trust. The statement is repeated, not once, not twice, but as many times as it takes, for as long as it takes, until something in the interior shifts, until the vision clears, until the weight lifts. And it will lift, because the superconscious mind, flooded with the genuine surrender of the personal will, moves swiftly and decisively to fill the space left by the released burden with the perfect equivalent of what was asked for. There is often, just before the demonstration arrives, a period of apparent darkness, a time when the doubts and fears that have lived in the deep subconscious rise to the surface. Not because the demonstration is failing, but because the light of the new consciousness is exposing what needs to be dissolved before it can come through. This is what has been called the darkness before the dawn, and it is at precisely this moment that the student must hold most firmly to the practice of casting the burden, of giving thanks, of standing still and seeing the salvation of the law, even while everything in the outer world seems to contradict the inner knowing. This is the moment that separates those who receive their demonstrations from those who give up just before the breakthrough arrives. And it is navigated not by more effort, not by more force, not by frantic reassessment of the strategy, but by deeper trust, quieter faith, and the continued, gentle, persistent casting of every doubt and every fear upon the divine intelligence within. Drop 333. I release this burden, and I trust the intelligence within me in the comments right now. Music has a fourth-dimensional quality. It releases the soul from the prison of limited thinking and makes extraordinary things feel not just possible, but inevitable. Many students of these laws find that their affirmations, spoken or sung in the context of music and rhythm, carry a power that the same words spoken in silence do not quite equal. The vibration of music opens channels that linear, rational thinking keeps closed. It bypasses the reasoning mind and speaks directly to the subconscious in the language of feeling, which is always, in the end, the language that produces the deepest and most lasting impressions. Active faith is always the bridge, not passive faith, not the faith that sits and waits and hopes, that says, "Yes, I believe," but does nothing that would demonstrate the belief in any tangible way. Active faith, the faith that prepares the place for the one who has not yet arrived, that sets the table for the feast that has not yet been served, that arranges the apartment for the piano that is already on its way, that clears the inner space through the casting of the burden, through the spoken declaration, through the deliberate cultivation of expectancy, so that what is already prepared in divine mind can find its way through without obstruction. Chapter 7. Love. Suffering, it must be said, is not necessary for growth. This is one of the most compassionate and least understood truths in the entire body of spiritual teaching. Suffering comes from violation of law, from the gap between where consciousness is and where the law requires it to be for the desired demonstration to manifest. But the moment a person understands the law and begins to align with it, suffering becomes unnecessary. Growth can happen through joy, through inspiration, through the expanding delight of a consciousness that is discovering its own limitless capacity. The person who loves genuinely, who gives freely, who holds the vision steadily and speaks the word faithfully, that person does not need to suffer their way to wisdom. They can arrive through understanding, through the very understanding these chapters are offering. And love, in all its forms, in all its expressions, in every dimension of human experience, is the ultimate fulfillment of the law. Love is not merely one of the good things that a rightly ordered life will produce. Love is the very substance from which the game of life is made. It is the energy that underlies every law, that animates every principle, that gives every practice its ultimate meaning and its ultimate power. To learn these laws is to learn to love, more wisely, more freely, more completely. To play this game at its highest level is to become someone who loves without condition, gives without calculation, blesses without reservation, and receives with the gracious, grateful openness of one who knows that all good comes from the one inexhaustible source. And that source withholds nothing from the one who has learned to receive it fully. Every man and every woman on this planet is taking, at some level, their deepest initiation in love. A new commandment 1. Give unto you, that ye love one another. These words, spoken with such simplicity, contain within them perhaps the most radical and most transformative instruction ever given to the human race. Because what they are pointing toward is not sentimental affection, not conditional approval, not the ordinary human experience of love that comes and goes with the behavior of those we love. They are pointing toward a love that is cosmic in its nature, a force that, when genuinely activated, opens the human being to dimensions of experience that cannot be reached by any other means. Real love is selfless and free from fear. It extends itself toward the object of its attention without requiring any particular response. Its joy is in the giving, not in the return, not in the confirmation that it has been received and appreciated and reciprocated. It pours itself out and asks nothing back, because it is not operating from a place of scarcity that requires replenishment. It is flowing from an inexhaustible source. And this is what makes it transformative, not just for the one who receives it, but far more profoundly for the one who gives it. Jealousy is the most corrosive enemy of love, because jealousy is love distorted by fear. It is the imagination running riot with pictures of loss, of betrayal, of the loved one being drawn away, and those pictures, held with emotional intensity in the subconscious, have exactly the creative power that all emotionally charged pictures have. They tend to objectify. They tend to draw into experience the very outcome they most dread. The person who loves someone with jealousy and fear does not hold that person close. They push them away through the invisible but entirely real energetic field that their inner state is generating around every interaction. Real love demands nothing. It criticizes nothing. It condemns nothing. It sees in the person loved, however imperfectly that person may be behaving in any given moment, the divine self beneath the human surface. It salutes the divinity in the other, as the Brotherhood in India saluted the divinity in every living thing. I see your divine self only. I see you as God sees you, perfect, made in the image and likeness of infinite intelligence. This is not pretense. This is not the denial of what is actually happening. It is the deliberate, disciplined choice to hold the person in the highest vision available, because that vision, held with consistency and genuine love, actually has the power to call forth the corresponding reality. Comment 528. I send love to everyone, and love returns to me multiplied in the comments now. The story of the woman whose lover had left her, who came with hatred and resentment consuming her, certain that she was the victim of cruelty and abandonment, and who, through months of deliberate inner work, gradually released the resentment and arrived at genuine love, genuine peace, genuine goodwill toward the man who had hurt her, is one of the most instructive stories in the entire game of life. Not because it produced the romantic outcome she had originally hoped for, but because it demonstrates with perfect clarity the mechanism by which genuine love, real, selfless, undemanding love, transforms the entire situation. She woke one morning and all suffering had ceased. And that same day he came back, not because she manipulated the situation, not because she played any particular strategic game, because the inner shift was genuine, and the outer situation, which had always been the mirror of her inner state, reflected that shift immediately and completely. No man is your enemy. No man is your friend. Every man is your teacher. This ancient saying, taken seriously, transforms every difficult relationship into a curriculum. What is this person showing me about myself? What pattern in my own consciousness is being reflected in this encounter? What is being given to me through this friction to heal and release and transcend? The person who can hold this perspective, who can maintain genuine curiosity and goodwill toward even the most challenging people in their experience, is the person who moves through life with the least resistance and the most grace, because they are not fighting any of their teachers. They are learning from all of them. Chapter 8. Intuition or Guidance. Man often limits his demonstration by limiting his vision. He asks for $600 when the universe is prepared to give thousands. He asks for a particular position when the divine design includes a far more expansive expression than anything his personal mind has conceived. He builds a bungalow in consciousness when the divine plan was always for a palace. The invitation, extended with extraordinary generosity by the law itself, is to enlarge the expectancy, to expand the vision, to make the demands upon the universal as large and as complete as the divine design actually is. Do not limit the Holy One of Israel. Do not place a ceiling on the supply that is infinite by nature. Ask for more than enough. Expect more than enough. Give thanks for more than enough. And watch as the law, responding to the expanded consciousness, brings forth demonstrations that would have seemed impossible from the smaller, more contracted state of consciousness that preceded the expansion. The student who stands still and sees the salvation of the Lord, who can remain unshaken while every outer appearance is suggesting that the demonstration has failed, that the timing has passed, that the supply is not coming, that student will always, ultimately, receive. Not sometimes, not under fortunate circumstances, always. Because the law does not fail. It cannot fail. It is as incapable of failure as the law of gravity is incapable of allowing objects to float unpowered in midair. What the law requires is only that the conditions for its operation be established in consciousness. And those conditions, the vision, the word, the faith, the non-resistance, the love, the active preparation, are entirely within the reach and the authority of every single person who chooses to establish them. Indecision is a stumbling block that many people never recognize for what it is. The person who cannot decide, who wavers between options, who changes direction with every new piece of information or every new opinion from outside, is broadcasting a signal of confusion to the subconscious. And the subconscious, receiving a confused signal, cannot produce a clear demonstration. The affirmation that dissolves indecision is this: I am always under direct inspiration. I make right decisions quickly and easily. Spoken with conviction and repeated until it has genuinely impressed itself upon the subconscious, this statement begins to produce a quality of inner clarity and decisiveness that transforms the speed and the elegance with which demonstrations manifest. Perfect self-expression, denial and affirmations. In all your ways acknowledge the divine intelligence within you, and it will direct your paths. There is nothing too great for the person who has learned to combine the clear spoken word with the faithful following of intuitive guidance. By the word, unseen forces are set in motion. By the lead, the inner prompting, the hunch, the sudden knowing that comes from the superconscious, those forces are directed toward the perfect outcome for the highest good of all concerned. The practice is this: speak the word and then do nothing until a clear lead appears. Demand the lead. Say, "Infinite Spirit, reveal to me the way. Let me know if there is anything for me to do." And then remain alert and open, not anxious, not grasping, not trying to figure it out through the reasoning mind, because the lead will come. It may come as a sudden thought, as a chance remark from a stranger, as a passage in a book that seems to leap off the page with personal significance, as an urge to go somewhere or call someone or take an action that the rational mind cannot immediately justify. The lead does not explain itself. Intuition is a spiritual faculty and does not explain. It simply points the way. Giving opens the way for receiving. Tithing, the practice of contributing a tenth of one's resources, is as old as recorded spiritual teaching, and it endures not because of religious tradition, but because it works. Because it is the deliberate activation of the law of circulation. Because it is the declaration, made concrete through action, that one trusts the supply to be inexhaustible, that releasing a portion of what is received does not diminish, but actually increases the flow. Many of the most abundantly provided for people who have ever walked this earth have understood this practice, not as obligation, but as privilege, not as sacrifice, but as investment. For each person there is a perfect self-expression, a particular contribution, a specific gift, a singular way of engaging with life that belongs to them and to no one else. It is already held, complete and perfect, in the superconscious mind. It is the divine design of that individual life. And the greatest single demand a person can make upon the infinite is this: Infinite Spirit, open the way for the divine design of my life to manifest. Let the genius within me now be released. Let me see clearly the perfect plan. Write 1, 1, 1, 1. I am aligned with the divine design of my life, and I step into it now in the comments. When this demand is made with genuine sincerity and genuine openness, when the person is truly willing to let the personal mind's plans give way to the divine plan, remarkable things begin to happen. Doors open that were never expected. Talents emerge that were previously unrecognized. Circumstances arrange themselves into configurations that could not have been manufactured through any amount of strategic planning. The perfect work appears. The right people arrive. The necessary resources flow. Because the divine design is not an abstraction, it is a specific, detailed, fully realized reality already present in the superconscious, awaiting only the person's genuine alignment with it to begin its outpicturing in the visible world. Perfect self-expression will never feel like labor. It will feel like play, like the natural, effortless, deeply satisfying expression of what one most essentially is. And the supply needed for that expression, whatever form it takes, is already present in the divine plan. Man comes into the world financed by God. The resources needed to fulfill the divine design are already arranged. They manifest as the consciousness aligns, as the word is spoken with faith, as the leads are followed with courage. And beneath everything, beneath every law, every principle, every practice, every declaration and affirmation, runs the single most important quality that makes any of it work. Not intelligence, not effort, not the precise wording of the affirmation or the consistency of the practice. Faith. Genuine, living, active faith. The kind of faith that does not wait for evidence before believing, that does not require the manifestation to be visible before it is real, that stands in what appears to be an empty field and sees a harvest already ripe and complete, that speaks the word in the desert and gives thanks for the rain before a single cloud has appeared. The square of life, the complete, whole, fully realized human life, is this: health, wealth, love, and perfect self-expression. Not one of these at the expense of another, not three of them with the fourth perpetually elusive. All four, together. Because this is the divine design. This is what infinite intelligence intends for every human being who will genuinely learn the rules of the game and play it with full commitment, full faith, and the full authority of one who knows that they are not separate from the source of all good, but are, in their deepest nature, one with it. Speak these words now, and let them settle into the deepest part of you. Divine love floods my consciousness, and every cell of my being responds with radiant health. My supply is infinite and flows to me freely and continuously under grace. I am surrounded by genuine love, and I extend genuine love to every person in my life. The perfect design of my life is now being revealed to me, and I move toward it with joy, with confidence, with complete trust in the intelligence that guides me. I am free. I am whole. I am fully alive to the extraordinary gift of this moment and this life. This is the game of life, not a battle, never a battle. A game played with knowledge, with faith, with love, and with the unshakable understanding that the one who created this magnificent game has already placed within every player everything needed to play it magnificently. The rules are yours. The word is yours. The vision is yours. The faith, that extraordinary, law-activating, reality-shaping force, is yours to develop, to deepen, and to bring to bear upon every circumstance of your life from this moment forward. And when you do, when you genuinely, consistently, courageously begin to play by these rules, you may well discover, as countless others have discovered before you, that the life you were always capable of living was never as far away as it seemed. It was always waiting. Just on the other side of the understanding you now hold. Welcome to the game, and may you play it from this day forward in every circumstance, in every relationship, in every quiet moment of inner work, and every bold outer step, like the extraordinary, divinely designed, infinitely capable human being you have always been. The game was always yours to play. Now you know how. Chapter 9. The Divine Completeness. There is a truth that runs beneath every law explored in these chapters. A truth so simple that the reasoning mind perpetually overlooks it in its search for complexity, and so complete that once it is genuinely absorbed, it changes the quality of everything. It is this: nothing is missing. Not from the universe, not from the divine plan, not from the life of any person who has aligned themselves, even imperfectly and even gradually, with the principles that govern the game. Whatever appears to be absent, whatever seems to be delayed, withheld, or out of reach, is not actually missing. It is simply not yet visible. It exists, complete and perfect, in the invisible realm of divine mind. And it is moving toward manifestation through exactly the channels that the law has already arranged. This understanding, that completion precedes visibility, that the harvest is real before it is seen, that the demonstration is finished in the invisible before it appears in the visible, is the foundation of what the scriptures call perfect faith. Not the faith that hopes things will eventually work out, the faith that already knows the work is done, that already gives thanks for what has not yet appeared, because in the dimension that matters most, the dimension of divine mind, where all true creation originates, it has already appeared. In divine mind, there is only completion. This single statement, held with genuine conviction in every moment of apparent delay, has the power to dissolve the most stubborn demonstrations of incompletion. My perfect work is complete in divine mind and manifests now. My perfect health is complete and manifests now in every cell of my body. My perfect supply flows freely and abundantly to me now. My perfect relationships, my perfect home, my perfect self-expression, all complete, all real, all moving now toward their physical outpicturing under grace and in perfect ways. Comment 888. My demonstration is already complete in divine mind, and I receive it now. Every great achievement in the history of human experience began as exactly this: an invisible completion held in faith by one person willing to believe before the evidence arrived. The student who understands this does not struggle. They do not grip the demonstration or try to force its timing. They hold the vision with the quiet certainty of someone who has seen the finished work and needs only to allow it to become visible. They speak the word, take the leads, maintain the inner peace, and they wait with expectancy rather than anxiety, with gratitude rather than grasping, with the joyful consciousness of one who knows that what they have asked for is already on its way. This is the game in its fullness. This is the player at their most powerful. And this is the life, radiant, free, abundantly provided for, that has always been waiting for you. Not somewhere else. Here. Now. In this word, you are now prepared to speak.